I always believed my marriage was solid. Sienna and I had been together for years, and while things weren't perfect, they were good, stable, real, or so I thought. The first cracks were small, the kind of things you ignore because you trust your partner. A change in tone when she spoke to me, the way she smiled at her phone more than at me, the late nights that weren't a problem before but suddenly felt different. At first, I dismissed it. Maybe work was stressing her out. Maybe she was just tired. I told myself all the things a man tells himself when he doesn't want to believe the truth. But then, the doubts started creeping in, slow and persistent, like a leak in a dam that you don't notice until it's too late. The first real sign came when she started putting her phone face down. She had never done that before. It was a small change, almost insignificant, but it meant something. I wasn't the type to go through her phone. I believed in trust and privacy. But something about the way she guarded it now, the way she took it everywhere, even to the bathroom, made my stomach twist. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't overthinking. Something was wrong. One night, she fell asleep early, curled up beside me. Her phone was still on the nightstand. I stared at it for a long time, debating. If I looked and found nothing, I'd feel like an idiot. But if I didn't look, and I was right, then I was letting myself be played. My hand moved before I could stop it. I picked up the phone, my pulse steady, my mind already preparing excuses for why I was doing this. Then I saw the message. I can't stop thinking about last night. We need to be more careful. Everything in me stilled. My stomach didn't drop. My hands didn't shake. If anything, I felt colder. I clicked the conversation, my heart beating slow and steady. The messages were there, stretching back for months. Flirting, plans, complaints about how guilty she felt, followed by promises that it was worth it. I kept scrolling, my jaw tightening, my teeth grinding together. I didn't need to see the pictures, the suggestive texts, the detailed descriptions of what they had done together. But I did. I let every single word sink in because I needed to know. And then, I saw his name. Ryan. My best friend. It felt like a joke. A sick, twisted joke that the universe had decided to play on me. Of all people, it was him. The guy I had trusted for years. The man I had told everything to. The same guy who had stood next to me at my wedding, raising a glass and making a toast about how Sienna and I were perfect for each other. The weight of it settled in my chest, heavy and suffocating. My wife hadn't just cheated. She had done it with the one person I never would have suspected. I put the phone down, my hands still eerily steady. I sat there, staring at the ceiling, my mind eerily clear. I had options. I could wake her up, shove the phone in her face, demand answers. I could call Ryan, tell him I knew, rip into him over the phone and listen to him scramble for excuses. I could pack my bags and leave. But all of that felt too easy. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of an emotional outburst. They wanted to play me for a fool? Fine. I would play along. Let them think I was still blind. Let them get comfortable. And when the time was right, I would rip their lives apart. That's when the real plan hit me. Ryan had taken something from me. My trust. My marriage. My respect. And I wanted to take something from him in return. Something worse. Something that would haunt him. Something that would make him regret every single moment he had spent sneaking around behind my back. That's when I thought of Emily, Ryan's mother. She was in her early 50s, recently divorced, and the type of woman who radiated warmth. She had always been kind to me, treating me like a second son, welcoming me into their home with open arms. And that was exactly what I was going to use against them. Because soon, I wasn't just going to be Ryan's best friend. I was going to be his stepfather. I wasn't going to rush this. I wasn't going to let my emotions take over. Revenge wasn't about anger. It was about control. Sienna and Ryan had spent months deceiving me, treating me like an afterthought while they indulged in their selfish betrayal. But now, I was the one pulling the strings, and neither of them had any idea. The first step was keeping up appearances. If I acted strange, if I became distant or bitter, Sienna would notice. She'd get suspicious. I couldn't let that happen. I had to make her believe that everything was fine, that I was the same trusting husband she had been playing all along. So, the next morning, I kissed her goodbye like I always did, told her I loved her, and watched as she walked out the door, her phone clutched a little too tightly in her hand. I knew she was waiting to text him. She was probably already imagining the thrill of messaging Ryan, telling him how much she missed him, how last night had been perfect. The thought made my stomach twist, but I swallowed the disgust. I had to stay in control. If I let emotions cloud my judgment, I would lose the upper hand. I had to be smart about this, calculated, precise. After she left, I made my next move. I reached out to Emily. It had been a while since we last spoke. Months, maybe. Ever since Ryan had moved out, I hadn't had much of a reason to visit his mom, but I knew she'd be happy to hear from me. Emily had always been warm, always treated me like family, and that was exactly what I was counting on. I dialed her number, keeping my voice casual. "Emily, hey, it's been too long." She sounded surprised but genuinely pleased. "James, wow, I haven't heard from you in ages. How are you?" I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. "Doing well, just been busy with work. I was actually thinking about how much I miss our talks. Thought I'd check in on you." She chuckled softly. "That's sweet of you. I've been good, just keeping busy. The house feels a little empty without Ryan around, but I'm managing." Bingo. I leaned into the conversation, making her laugh, making her feel comfortable. I let her talk about herself, let her feel heard. And then, right when the moment was right, I planted the first seed. "You know, Emily," I said, my voice smooth, "we should catch up properly. Let me take you out to dinner this week." There was a small pause on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. "Dinner? Yeah, why not? You've always been like a second mother to me. It'd be nice to catch up." She hesitated, but not for long. "That sounds lovely, James. I'd really enjoy that." Step 1. Complete. That evening, I played my role perfectly. I cooked dinner for Sienna, poured her a glass of wine, asked about her day like nothing was different. She relaxed into it, laughing at my jokes, touching my arm like she still had me wrapped around her finger. She had no idea that I had spent my afternoon setting up the first phase of her destruction. After she went to bed, I grabbed her phone. She had a password now. Smart, but not smart enough. I had seen her enter it before. A quick 4-digit code. I unlocked it easily, and there it was. A fresh text from Ryan. "I miss you. When can I see you again?" I didn't respond. I didn't delete it. I wanted her to keep digging her own grave. Instead, I sent myself screenshots. More proof. More fuel for the fire. And then, I sent a message of my own. To Ryan's mother. "Looking forward to our dinner, Emily. Can't wait to see you." This was just the beginning. Ryan took something from me. Now, I was going to take everything from him. The thing about betrayal is that it thrives in the shadows. Lies only survive when they remain hidden. And I wasn't about to let that happen anymore. Sienna and Ryan had been playing their little game behind my back, thinking I was blind, thinking I'd never catch on. But now, they were the ones in the dark. I had already started planting the seeds. The dinner with Emily was scheduled. The messages between Sienna and Ryan kept piling up. I had more than enough evidence to destroy them both. But I wasn't in a rush. Rushed revenge is sloppy revenge. I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal went before I set fire to everything. That meant I had to follow the lies. Track her. Watch her. Let her think she was safe, while I pulled the rug from underneath her feet. The next morning, I played my part like a seasoned actor. I kissed her on the forehead, told her I hoped she had a good day at work, even made her coffee before she left. She smiled at me, soft and affectionate. But I noticed the way she kept her phone screen tilted away from me. The way she barely touched me anymore unless she had to. It didn't matter. Soon, she wouldn't be able to touch me at all. As soon as she walked out the door, I was right behind her. Step 1. Tracking her. I had installed a GPS tracker on her phone 2 nights ago. Nothing complex, just a simple app disguised as a battery saver. She had no idea. I watched her location on my screen as she drove off, expecting her to head straight to work. But instead, she took a turn. A wrong turn. She wasn't going to work. I followed at a safe distance, careful not to get too close. She pulled into a parking lot in front of a small cafe. My heart pounded, not with fear, not with anxiety, but with a cold, calculated calm. She got out of the car, checked her phone, then walked inside. And then, he showed up. Ryan. That smug bastard walked into the cafe without a care in the world. No hesitation. No paranoia. He wasn't even trying to hide it. That's what pissed me off the most. They weren't even being careful anymore. They had gotten too comfortable. Good. That would make this even easier. I parked a few spots away, grabbed a baseball cap from my glove compartment, and pulled it low over my face. Then, I walked inside. Step 2. Observing them up close. The cafe was small, cozy, but I wasn't there to admire the decor. I kept my head down as I ordered a black coffee, taking a seat near the back. Sienna and Ryan sat at a corner booth, their heads close together, whispering like a couple of teenagers sneaking around behind their parents' backs. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough. He hasn't said anything? Ryan asked, stirring his coffee. Sienna shook her head. Nothing. He's acting totally normal. Ryan smirked. Told you. He has no clue. My grip on my cup tightened. Sienna sighed. I hate sneaking around like this, but I can't stop. Every time I'm with you, it's like, she trailed off, biting her lip. Ryan leaned in, brushing his fingers over her hand. Like what? She smiled, that same damn smile she used to give me. Like I finally feel alive. I took a slow sip of my coffee, controlling the pure rage simmering under my skin. Alive? She felt alive sneaking around with him? The woman I had spent years loving, supporting, building a future with? She felt nothing with me, but everything with him? That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just some mistake. This was who she was. She had never respected me. She had never truly loved me. And that meant I had no reason to hold back anymore. I got up slowly, tossing a few bills on the table, and walked out of the cafe without them ever knowing I was there. Step 3. Preparing for the next move. I spent the rest of the afternoon refining my plan. Sienna thought she had the upper hand. Ryan thought I was an idiot. But they had no idea what was coming. That night, I made sure to act completely normal. I kissed Sienna when she got home. I asked about her day. I even ran her a hot bath, pretending to be the devoted husband. She had no clue I had followed her. No clue I had watched her feed Ryan the same lies she fed me. While she soaked in the tub, I grabbed my phone and checked my messages. Emily had responded. Can't wait for dinner, James. It's been too long. Let me know where you'd like to go. Perfect. I smirked, replying quickly. I'll make reservations. It'll be a night to remember. And then, for the final touch, I opened up Sienna's phone. She still hadn't deleted her text with Ryan. Careless. I typed out a message, keeping it simple. Tomorrow. Same time. Same place. Can't stop thinking about you. And then, I deleted it from her phone, but left it on Ryan's. Let him think she sent it. Let him show up. Because tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow, I won't just be watching. Tomorrow, I'll be the one pulling the strings. The morning felt different. Maybe it was the calm before the storm, the eerie stillness that always comes before everything explodes. Sienna had no idea that her perfect little affair was about to come crashing down around her. Ryan had no clue that today would be the last time he ever looked at me and thought I was the fool. I had set everything in motion the night before. The text I sent from her phone. The reservation with Emily. The pieces were all moving exactly the way I wanted them to. Now, I just had to sit back and let the chaos unfold. Sienna was in an unusually good mood that morning, humming softly to herself as she poured coffee into her favorite mug. Maybe she was thinking about seeing him today. Maybe she was replaying their last secret meeting in her head. The thought made my blood boil, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I kissed her on the cheek. Let her think I was still clueless. Big day today? I asked, sipping my coffee. She shrugged, tucking her hair behind her ear. Nothing exciting. Just work. Liar. I nodded, smiling as if I believed her. Maybe we can do something tonight, I suggested. Just the two of us. She hesitated. I could see it in the way her fingers curled around her mug just a little too tightly. She was already thinking of an excuse. Tonight might be tough, she said carefully. I'm probably going to be exhausted after work. Right. She was so predictable. I leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Let her think I still adored her. That's okay, I murmured. I just want to spend time with you. She gave me a soft, guilty smile. I know. Soon. Okay? I nodded. Liar. She kissed me goodbye and left for work. Except, I already knew where she was really going. Step 1. Getting there first. I waited exactly 10 minutes before I left the house. Long enough that she wouldn't suspect anything. I had parked a rental car 2 streets down, so she wouldn't notice my car following her. I wasn't going to make stupid mistakes today. I checked my phone. The tracker was working perfectly. She was heading straight for the cafe. The same place. The same booth. The same routine. Ryan was already there when she arrived. I parked a few spots away, heart pounding, but not with nerves. Not with doubt. With anticipation. Because today, I wasn't just going to watch. Today, I was going to end it. Step 2. The confrontation. I walked into the cafe slowly, casually, as if I was just another customer. The bell above the door jingled, but neither of them looked up. They were too caught up in each other. Ryan leaned in close, smiling that smug, overconfident grin. The same one he had probably worn behind my back for months. Sienna laughed softly, tucking her hair behind her ear like she always did when she was nervous but excited. The same move she used on me. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to remain calm. They had no idea I was here. I walked up to the counter, ordered a coffee, and then, finally, I made my move. I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture, and sent it directly to her. Then I waited. Sienna's phone vibrated against the table. She glanced down, and her entire face drained of color. Her hands started shaking. She knew. I saw it happen in real time. The exact moment she realized she was caught. Her head snapped up, and then she saw me. I met her eyes, calm, steady. She froze. Ryan frowned, looking between us. What's wrong? Sienna opened her mouth, then closed it again. Panicking. Scrambling. I took a slow sip of my coffee before setting it down and finally walking toward them. Ryan's eyes widened slightly as I pulled out a chair and sat down across from them. Like I belonged there. Like I wasn't the one being lied to. Like I was the one in control. Morning, I said smoothly, folding my hands on the table. Sienna's breath hitched. Her hands curled into fists on the tabletop. Ryan exhaled, trying to play it cool. James, hey, what are you? I raised a hand, cutting him off. Don't. His mouth snapped shut. I turned to Sienna. She wouldn't even look at me. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table, screen facing up. Messages. Pictures. Everything. I tapped the screen. You've been busy, I said softly. She swallowed hard, her pulse visible in her throat. James, Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Look, man, I don't know what you think. I laughed. Actually laughed. Then I met his gaze, my smile fading. Ryan, I said slowly, shut the fuck up. His jaw clenched, but he didn't say another word. Good. I looked back at Sienna. How long? She hesitated, and then she did the worst thing she could have done. She lied. It was just a mistake, she whispered. It didn't mean anything. Ryan flinched slightly at that. Oh, so maybe it meant something to him. Interesting. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling through my nose. This wasn't a mistake. This was months of deception. This was intentional, and she still couldn't admit it. Right? I said, nodding. A mistake. Sienna opened her mouth, but I was already standing. I pulled out my wallet, dropped a few bills on the table, and met her gaze one last time. Pay the bill, I said coolly. Since you like sneaking around so much, you can sneak your way home. And then, I turned and walked away, leaving them both to drown in their own guilt. I walked out of that cafe without looking back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what I had left behind. A scene of complete devastation. Sienna and Ryan, sitting there, frozen in panic, realizing that the life they had been so comfortably building behind my back was now collapsing in real time. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I had played the first card, and now? Now it was time to watch them squirm. I got into my car, but I didn't drive home. I wasn't about to sit around waiting for Sienna to crawl back, tears in her eyes, spewing whatever bullshit excuse she had prepared. No, I had better things to do. I had a dinner to get ready for. Step 1. Playing it cool. I had made dinner reservations for 7 p.m. A fancy restaurant, the kind where the lights were dim, the wine was overpriced, and everyone pretended their lives were perfect. It was exactly the kind of place I needed. I checked my phone before I left the house. A dozen missed calls from Sienna. 2 from Ryan. I smirked. They were unraveling already. Good. I ignored the calls, silenced my phone, and grabbed my jacket. Tonight wasn't about them. Tonight was about Emily. Step 2. Turning the tables. Emily looked stunning when she walked into the restaurant. Classy. Graceful. A woman who carried herself with dignity. The complete opposite of her son. She smiled when she saw me, and I stood, pulling out her chair like a gentleman, because that's what I was. A gentleman. A man who knew how to treat a woman right. A man who wasn't out here betraying the people who loved him. She sipped her wine, tilting her head slightly. You seem different tonight. I smiled. Different good or different bad? She laughed softly. Good. But, I don't know. Something feels different about you. More confident. I leaned in slightly, holding her gaze. Maybe because I finally see things clearly. She gave me a curious look, but I didn't elaborate. Not yet. Instead, I poured us both another glass of wine and let the conversation flow. Emily was easy to talk to, warm, engaging. I could see why Ryan hated the fact that I was close to her. He had always been territorial about his mother, acting like no man was good enough for her. And yet, here I was, taking her out, making her laugh. And soon, I'd be a hell of a lot more than just her dinner companion. Step 3. Letting Sienna drown in her own guilt. I finally checked my phone when I got back to my car. 30 missed calls. 17 texts. Sienna was spiraling. I opened the last message she had sent. James, please, I need to talk to you. I can explain. Please come home. Please. I smirked. Pathetic. She wasn't sorry she had done it. She was sorry she got caught. I started driving, but I didn't go home. Not yet. I let her sit in that house, pacing, waiting, desperate to know what I was thinking. She deserved that much. Step 4. Making her face the consequences. It was nearly midnight when I finally walked through the front door. She was sitting on the couch, eyes red, phone clutched in her hands. The moment she saw me, she shot up, rushing toward me. James. I held up a hand. She froze. For the first time since this whole thing started, I saw fear in her eyes. Good. I walked past her, calm, controlled, and sat down. Sit. She hesitated, then obeyed. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Go ahead, I said, my voice eerily calm. Explain. She swallowed hard. It wasn't supposed to happen. I laughed. Actually laughed. Her face crumbled. James, please. I love you. I made a mistake. A mistake? I repeated, my voice laced with amusement. Sienna, a mistake is forgetting to turn off the stove. A mistake is missing a meeting at work. Fucking my best friend for months isn't a mistake. That's a choice. She flinched. It didn't mean anything, she whispered. I tilted my head. Then why were you still doing it? Silence. Her lip trembled. I don't know. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Let me help you then. You did it because you liked it. Because it made you feel powerful. Because you liked sneaking around and getting away with it. Tears streamed down her face. I swear, James, I love you. I never wanted to hurt you. I studied her for a moment, then sighed. I believe you. Hope flickered in her eyes. You do? I nodded. Yeah, I believe that you didn't want to hurt me. You just didn't care enough to stop. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I stood up, walking to the staircase. Pack your things, Sienna. She shot up from the couch. What? No. Please, we can fix this. I turned, finally letting my anger show. There's nothing to fix. You don't get to break me, and then ask me to put myself back together for you. She sobbed. James, please. I shook my head. We're done. And then, I walked upstairs, leaving her sitting there, completely destroyed. Exactly like she deserved. Sienna didn't leave that night. She sat in the living room for hours, sobbing into her hands, whispering to herself like she was trying to rewrite the story in her head, trying to find a version of events where she wasn't the villain. But there wasn't one. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not even a little. I watched from the top of the stairs as she clutched her phone, probably hoping Ryan would text her, call her, save her. But he didn't. Because Ryan? He was dealing with his own problems. He just didn't know it yet. Step 1. Isolating her. By the time morning rolled around, Sienna was still there, curled up on the couch. She must have cried herself to sleep. Pathetic. I walked into the kitchen, made coffee like usual, and sat down at the table without saying a word. She stirred at the sound, slowly sitting up. Her eyes were swollen, her hair a mess. She looked as broken as I wanted her to be. James, her voice was hoarse. I didn't look up. You're still here. She flinched. I didn't know where to go. I finally met her gaze, my expression unreadable. That's not my problem. Her lip trembled. Can we talk? I took a slow sip of my coffee, then set the mug down. Talk? I mused. About what? The months you spent fucking my best friend? The way you lied to my face over and over? Or the fact that I'll never trust another woman again because of you? She swallowed hard. I deserve that. You deserve a lot more than that, I said coolly. She shifted, uncomfortable. James, please. I don't want to lose you. I tilted my head, studying her. You lost me the second you let him touch you. Silence. She wiped at her face. What if we try to fix this? I laughed. Actually laughed. Fix this? She nodded desperately. I'll do anything. Therapy. Counseling. I'll cut off all contact with Ryan. Whatever it takes. I sighed, shaking my head. You don't get it, do you? She blinked at me, confused. I leaned forward, my tone dropping. Sienna, I don't want to fix this. I don't want to save our marriage. I don't even want to look at you. Tears filled her eyes. I smiled slightly. You should go. Her breath hitched. James, please. I stood up, walking past her without another word. Let her cry. She had earned it. Step 2. Ruining Ryan. Sienna wasn't the only one who needed to suffer. Ryan had gotten away with far too much for far too long. But not anymore. I spent the next few hours digging through everything I had on him. Texts. Pictures. Screenshots. He had been so sloppy, so sure he wouldn't get caught. I had proof of him talking shit about his own job, slacking off, even bragging about how he was untouchable. That's where he was wrong. Because Ryan worked for a corporate firm. And his boss? An old friend of mine. I dialed the number and leaned back in my chair, waiting. James, Mark answered. What's up, man? I smiled. I've got something interesting for you. Step 3. Taking everything. Ryan lost his job that afternoon. He didn't even see it coming. I knew exactly how it went down. Mark called him in, showed him the emails and messages I had sent over, and fired his ass on the spot. No warning. No second chances. By the time Ryan realized what had happened, it was already too late. I didn't respond to his frantic texts. I didn't answer his calls. I let him sit in the mess he created. Step 4. Turning Sienna's life into a nightmare. She still hadn't left. I came home that night to find her sitting on our bed, looking up at me like I was her last chance at salvation. James, please, she whispered. Can we just talk? I closed the door behind me, locking eyes with her. Fine. Let's talk. Hope flickered in her gaze. Really? I nodded, stepping closer. But first, I have a question. She swallowed. Anything? I tilted my head. Did you ever feel guilty? Tears welled in her eyes again. Yes, she breathed. Every day. I smirked. Good. Then I pulled out the envelope. Her eyes widened as I tossed it on the bed beside her. What is this? She asked, her voice shaking. I crossed my arms. Divorce papers. Her hands trembled as she reached for them. James, no. Oh, and one more thing, I added casually. You're moving out. Tonight. Her mouth opened and closed. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Maybe Ryan will take you in. Oh wait, he just lost his job. My bad. She gasped softly. You? I nodded. Yeah, I did that. She shook her head, finally realizing. You planned this. You. I smiled coldly. Did you really think I was just going to let this go? That I was going to let you and Ryan fuck me over and walk away? She covered her mouth, fully breaking. I turned, walking toward the door. James, please, she choked out. I paused. You know what the funniest part is? She blinked at me. I grinned. I had dinner with Ryan's mom last night. Her entire body went still. I leaned in slightly. She loves spending time with me. I wonder how she'd feel about having me around permanently. Tears streamed down her face. I laughed softly. Maybe I'll be your ex-husband and Ryan's stepdad. And then, I walked out, leaving her life in ruins. Exactly like she deserved. Ryan stormed off, but I knew this wasn't over. Not for him. Not for Sienna. I watched him disappear into the night, his whole world shattered, and I could almost feel the weight of his thoughts crushing him. He thought she loved him, thought he had one, thought he had stolen something precious from me. But now he knew the truth. Sienna had played him just as much as she had played me. And the best part? She had nowhere to run. I turned back to her, standing there in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself, shaking. Her eyes were still wet, red-rimmed, swollen from crying. But I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel sympathy. I didn't feel anything for her at all. She opened her mouth, trying to find something to say, but nothing came. She knew there were no words that could fix this. Nothing that could make me look at her the way I used to. Nothing that could undo the months of betrayal, the nights spent in his arms while I lay next to her in our bed, oblivious. I walked past her without a word, heading inside. I could feel her presence behind me, hesitant, nervous, waiting for me to acknowledge her. I didn't. I grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the kitchen and poured myself a glass, savoring the silence, the weight of my victory pressing down on her. She took a slow, shaky step forward. James, her voice was barely above a whisper, like she was afraid to speak too loudly, afraid to shatter whatever fragile hope she had left. I took a slow sip of my drink before finally turning to face her. What? She flinched at the coldness in my tone. Can we just talk? I laughed. Talk? About what, Sienna? About how you've spent the last few months fucking my best friend. About how you lied to me every single day. Or maybe about how you told him you loved him while telling me you wanted to work on our marriage. She looked away, shame washing over her face. I don't love him. I raised an eyebrow. That's funny, because that's not what you told him. Her lip trembled. I thought I did, but it was never real. I took another sip, letting the burns settle in my throat. And I'm supposed to care about that now? Her hands curled into fists at her sides. I made a mistake. I slammed my glass down on the counter, making her jump. No, Sienna. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is running a red light. What you did, that was a choice. Every single time you went to him, every lie you told me, every text you sent, it was a choice. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I cut her off. Do you know what the worst part is? You didn't just betray me. You made me feel like I was crazy. You made me question myself, doubt my instincts, believe that I was the problem. You let me sit here, loving you, trusting you, while you were out there with him. She sobbed, shaking her head. I hate myself for what I did. I tilted my head. Good. Silence stretched between us. She wiped at her face, swallowing hard. Is there any chance? Any way you could ever forgive me? I smiled, slow and cruel. No. Her breath hitched. I leaned forward, my voice dropping. You lost me the second you let him touch you. You lost everything the moment you decided I wasn't enough. And now? You're going to lose a hell of a lot more. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I grabbed my phone, opened my email, and pulled up the divorce papers. I turned the screen toward her. Sign them. She blinked, shaking her head. James. I cut her off. There's nothing to talk about, Sienna. You lost. She broke down completely, sinking onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. But I wasn't done yet. I walked to the front door, opened it, and gestured outside. Now get out. She looked up at me, disbelief etched across her face. You can't be serious. I stared at her, unblinking. I'm dead serious. She shook her head frantically. I have nowhere to go. I smirked. That's not my problem. Her face crumpled. Please, James. I exhaled, leaning against the doorframe. You know what's funny? I actually had dinner with Ryan's mom last night. Her entire body went still. I chuckled. She loves spending time with me. I wonder how she'd feel about having me around permanently. She gasped softly, realization hitting her like a freight train. I leaned in slightly. Imagine that. Losing your husband and watching your little boyfriend call me stepdad. She sobbed, gripping her chest like she couldn't breathe. I smiled. She deserved every second of this. I stepped back, nodding toward the door. Now leave. She didn't move. I sighed. Fine. If you won't leave willingly. I pulled out my phone and called her parents. Sienna's eyes widened in horror. James, don't. I ignored her. Hey, Deborah. Yeah, I'm fine. Listen, Sienna needs a place to stay. Can you come pick her up? Her mother's voice was confused. What? Why? What's going on? I smirked. Ask her. Sienna lunged for the phone, but I stepped away, dodging her easily. Deborah hesitated. James, is everything okay? I kept my eyes locked on Sienna as I responded. Not really, but don't worry. You'll find out soon enough. Her mother sighed. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up. Sienna looked like she was on the verge of passing out. You called my mom? She whispered, horror in her voice. I smirked. You really thought I was going to let you hide this? She shook her head, pure devastation washing over her. You're cruel. I leaned in, dropping my voice to a whisper. No, Sienna. I'm just finally giving you what you deserve. Her parents arrived 20 minutes later. They didn't know the full story yet, but the moment they saw her tear-streaked face, her shaking hands, they knew something was seriously wrong. Her mother frowned at me. James, what's going on? I smiled politely. Maybe Sienna should explain it to you. Her father sighed, rubbing his temples. Come on, Sienna. Let's go. She looked at me one last time, like she was hoping for some sign of mercy. I gave her none. And just like that, she was gone. I exhaled slowly, closing the door, letting the silence settle in. Finally, she was out of my life. But I wasn't done yet. Because now, it was time to finish ruining Ryan. Ryan thought he could disappear. Thought that after our last encounter, after I shattered his world, he could just fade into the background, regroup, figure out his next move. He was wrong. He had taken something from me, broken something that could never be repaired, and now it was time to return the favor. Sienna was gone. Out of my house, out of my life. I hadn't blocked her yet because there was something satisfying about seeing her texts pop up, desperate, pathetic. She had nowhere to go, and Ryan wasn't answering her calls. I smirked at the thought. He had his own problems now. Losing his job was just the beginning. He hadn't figured out yet that it was me, but he would soon. And when he did, when he realized just how deep I had cut into his life, he'd finally understand the kind of man he had betrayed. I had spent years being the good guy, the loyal friend, the dependable husband, the man people could count on. That version of me was dead. Ryan had killed him the second he put his hands on my wife. Now, I was something else entirely. And Ryan? He was about to experience exactly what that meant. I spent the next few days gathering everything I needed. Every secret I had on him, every weakness I could exploit. His financial situation? A disaster. Credit cards maxed out, student loans still dragging him down, barely scraping by before he lost his job. His reputation? Tied entirely to that job, to the image he had built of himself as a rising star in his industry. He had spent years climbing, networking, making sure the right people saw him as valuable. And I was about to burn all of it to the ground. The first step was taking away his safety net. I made a few calls, pulling in favors, making sure every job he applied for ended before it even began. He wouldn't just be unemployed. He'd be untouchable. A liability. No company wanted to hire someone with a history of workplace misconduct, and thanks to some carefully crafted emails, that was exactly what Ryan had now. He had no idea why every interview he landed suddenly ghosted him. No clue why every lead dried up before he even had a chance. I let him stew in it for a while, let him feel the weight of his life crumbling around him. Then, just when I knew he was at his breaking point, I made my next move. I reached out to Emily. Ryan's mother had always been good to me. She was warm, kind, treated me like family. And unlike her son, she actually had a moral compass. I knew exactly how to use that. I invited her to dinner again, made sure she saw me as the same loyal, dependable James she had always known. And when the moment was right, when she was comfortable and relaxed, I dropped the bomb. "Emily," I said, setting down my wine glass, "I need to tell you something about Ryan." She frowned, concern immediately flickering in her eyes. "What is it?" I sighed, as if I was hesitant, as if this was hard for me. I wasn't going to say anything, but after everything that's happened, after what he did to me, I can't stay silent. Her hand gripped her glass tighter. "What did he do?" I looked her dead in the eyes, letting the words sink in before I even spoke them. "He had an affair with Sienna, my wife." The shock hit her instantly. Her breath caught, her face paled, her entire body tensed. "No," she whispered. "Ryan, he wouldn't." I nodded slowly. "He did. For months. Behind my back. Lying to me every single day." Tears filled her eyes, and she shook her head, disbelief and shame flooding her expression. "Oh my God!" I reached across the table, resting a hand on hers. "I thought you deserved to know. You've always treated me like family. And I don't think you raised a son who would do something like this." Her lips trembled. "I didn't. James, I'm so sorry." I squeezed her hand, giving her a sad smile. "It's not your fault." She wiped at her face, taking a shaky breath. "I don't even know what to say. I can't believe he would. How could he do this to you?" I leaned back, letting the moment settle. "Maybe you should ask him." I could see the wheels turning in her mind, the realization sinking deeper and deeper. She wasn't just horrified. She was disappointed. Ryan had always been her pride and joy, the son she had worked so hard to raise right. And now? Now she was questioning everything she thought she knew about him. Exactly what I wanted. The best part? She would confront him. And when she did, she would destroy him in a way I never could. Because losing his job was one thing. Losing his future was another. But losing his mother's respect? That was a wound that would never heal. I waited until I knew she had spoken to him, until I saw the rage in his texts, the frantic calls, the desperation. Then, finally, I picked up the phone. "You did this," he seethed the second I answered. I smirked. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "My mom won't even look at me," he shouted. "She called me a fucking disgrace." I chuckled. Well, she's not wrong. His breathing was ragged, furious. "You think you're so fucking smart, don't you?" "I don't think," I said, my voice ice cold. "I know." He went silent, fuming. "You ruined my life." "No, Ryan," I said calmly. "You did that all on your own." I hung up, tossing my phone onto the couch. The revenge was almost complete. Sienna was gone. Ryan was finished. But there was one last move to make. Because now it was time to take everything he had left. Ryan had nothing left. No job, no reputation. His mother wouldn't even look at him, and Sienna had been discarded like the broken thing she was. But I wasn't done yet. Because people like Ryan always had one last shred of dignity they clung to, one last illusion that they could rebuild, crawl back, start over. I wasn't going to let that happen. I let him sit in his misery for a while, let him feel the full weight of everything crumbling around him. Then, when I knew he was at his lowest, when I knew he was desperate, I made my final move. I found out where he was staying, some cheap motel, the kind that smelled like cigarettes and bad decisions. He wasn't taking Sienna's calls anymore. She was panicking, drowning in the mess she had created, and he wasn't going to save her, because he couldn't even save himself. I drove there at midnight. I didn't knock. I didn't give him time to prepare. I just opened the door. He was too stupid to lock it properly and stepped inside. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, a half-empty bottle of whiskey in his hand, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He barely reacted when he saw me. "Come to gloat," he muttered. I smirked. "I don't need to gloat. You did all of this to yourself." He chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. "You got me fired. You turned my mom against me. What more do you want?" I took a slow step closer, letting my presence suffocate him. "I want you to remember this moment, Ryan. I want you to remember what it feels like to lose, to have everything you built crumble at your feet, to know that you're completely alone." He scoffed, rubbing his face. "Congratulations. You win." I tilted my head. "Oh, I've already won. This isn't about that." He frowned, looking up at me. "Then what is this about?" I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping to a whisper. "This is about making sure you never forget what happens when you betray me." His jaw tightened. "You think I don't already know that?" I smiled coldly. "Not yet, but you will." He exhaled sharply, gripping his whiskey bottle tighter. "What the hell do you want from me?" I shrugged. "Nothing. I just came to watch you suffer." He let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. "You really are a cold bastard." I smirked. "Took you long enough to figure that out." He didn't say anything, just stared at the floor, lost, broken. I let the silence stretch between us, let him feel the weight of it. Then, finally, I turned and walked to the door. Before I left, I looked over my shoulder. "Enjoy the rest of your life, Ryan, however much of it you have left." And then I was gone. I didn't need to say anything else. The damage was done. He would never recover from this. And that was enough for me. I drove home, exhaling slowly, feeling the tension finally start to fade. The war was over. I had won. And now? Now it was time to move forward. Sienna had tried to reach out a few more times, but I never responded. She wasn't worth my time. I filed the divorce papers, cut off every remaining tie to her, erased her from my life like she had never existed. And it felt good. No, it felt right. I focused on myself, got back in shape, spent more time with people who actually mattered. And the best part? I started seeing Emily more. Not in a forced way, not in a calculated way. It just happened naturally. And when Ryan found out, when he realized I was exactly where he never wanted me to be, that was just the final cherry on top. The last little piece of destruction that ensured he would never, ever forget what he had done to me. And that, more than anything, was the real victory. Because at the end of it all, I wasn't just the guy who got cheated on. I wasn't the fool they thought they had played. I was the one who walked away stronger. The one who took everything from them. The one who won. And they were nothing. Just ghosts in my past. Exactly where they belonged.